A man whispered 3 words to his wife that he thought would break her. But those words reached the wrong ears. And from that night forward, nothing in either of their lives would ever be the same. Before this story pulls you under, make sure you are subscribed, because this one is going to take you somewhere you are not ready for. The restaurant was the kind of place where quiet people went to feel important. White tablecloths, low lighting, the kind of silence that costs money. Every fork placed just right, every glass filled before it ran empty. It was a Thursday night in the city of Daejeon, and the booths along the east wall were reserved for people who did not want to be seen. Dorothy Milani sat across from her husband, Gabriel, at table 7. She was 29 years old, with deep brown skin and natural hair pinned back in a way that made her look both tired and elegant at the same time. She wore a green dress she had ironed twice that morning because Gabriel had complained about wrinkles the last time they went out. She had driven 40 minutes in traffic to be here. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say. She had even written it down in her notes app. 3 bullet points about trying again, about counseling, about their 5-year marriage being worth something. Gabriel was not listening. He was checking his watch, the gold one she had bought for their 3rd anniversary, and scrolling through something on his phone with one thumb. "Gabriel," she said quietly. I came here to talk. Can you put the phone down?" He set it face down on the table. That was something, she supposed. He looked at her then, and the look was not cruel exactly. It was worse than cruel. It was tired. The look a person gives something they stopped caring about a long time ago but haven't had the energy to throw away. "You look nice," he said, like it was an afterthought. "Thank you." She linked her fingers together on the table. "Gabriel, I think we should try—" "Dorothy." He cut her off, gently, like he was correcting a child. "We've had this conversation." "We haven't, actually. You've ended it every time before I could finish." He exhaled through his nose, picked up his water glass. Dorothy pressed on. "I found a counselor. Her office is 20 minutes from the apartment. She has evening slots, and I already—" "I'm not going to counseling." "Why not?" "Because there is nothing to fix." The words landed flat. Dorothy looked at him. "What does that mean?" Gabriel set his glass down. He glanced around the restaurant, left, right, the automatic check of a man who did not want to be overheard. He leaned in just slightly and lowered his voice to something barely above a breath. "It means," he said, "that you are better off dead." He did not shout it. He did not snarl it. He said it the way someone says the meeting is canceled or the car needs gas. Factual. Done. Dorothy did not cry. She did not stand up. She sat very still and looked at her husband, this man she had married at 24, this man whose socks she had washed, whose mother she had cared for after surgery, whose failures she had protected like secrets. And she felt something inside her go very, very quiet. She was not sure how long she sat like that. What she did not know, what neither of them knew, was that in the booth directly behind Gabriel, separated by nothing but a thin panel of dark wood, a man had been sitting alone since 8 o'clock. His name was Woo Jin-suk. He was 34 years old, and he was from Cheonan. He had a glass of water in front of him that he had not touched, a menu he had not opened, and the particular stillness of someone who had learned a long time ago that being underestimated was a weapon. He wore a plain dark jacket, no jewelry except for a single thin ring on his right hand. He looked, to anyone who glanced at him, like a quiet businessman having a quiet meal. He was not a quiet businessman. Woo Jin-suk was the kind of man whose name made other men lower their voices. He ran operations across 4 cities. He had walked away from situations that should have put him underground. He had a reputation for 2 things: being very calm and being very serious about people who deserved better than what they were getting. He had heard every word. He had not meant to listen. He was waiting for someone who was now 40 minutes late, and the couple behind him had not been trying to be loud. But the restaurant was quiet, and the wooden panel between booths was thin, and when a man tells his wife she is better off dead in a voice like he is reading off a grocery list, That kind of thing carries. Woo Jin-suk did not react. He did not turn around. He lifted his water glass and took one slow sip and placed it back down. His expression did not change, but his eyes, dark, careful, the kind that took inventory without ever seeming to look, shifted toward the edge of the booth. Dorothy stood up. She picked up her small purse. She pulled her coat from the back of the chair with steady hands. She looked at Gabriel one last time, and she said, very quietly, "Okay." Just that. "Okay." And she walked out. Gabriel watched her go. He looked mildly inconvenienced, the way you look when a waiter brings the wrong order. Then he picked his phone back up. Outside, the night air was sharp and cold. Dorothy walked to the far end of the parking lot and stood next to her car and did not get in. She just stood there. The city made its sounds around her. Distant traffic, someone's music from an upper window, the hum of a streetlight nearby. She was not sure what she was waiting for. Maybe for the feeling to come. The crying or the anger or whatever was supposed to happen when your husband said something like that. Nothing came yet. She was still standing there 5 minutes later when the restaurant door opened, and a man in a dark jacket walked out. He was unhurried. He looked around once and then looked directly at her. Not in a threatening way. Not in the way men sometimes look at women alone in parking lots. He looked at her the way someone looks at a person they have been expecting to check on. He stopped at a respectful distance. "Are you all right?" he asked. His Korean accent was there, but his English was clear and direct. Dorothy looked at him. "I'm fine." "You don't have to be," he said simply. She blinked. It was such a strange thing to say. Most people, when you said "I'm fine," either left you alone or pushed too hard. This man did neither. He just stood there, like he was giving her room. "I don't know you," she said. "No," he agreed. A silence passed between them. The streetlight buzzed. "I heard," he said. "Not on purpose. The booths." He gestured slightly with his hand. "I'm sorry you had to hear those words." Dorothy looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at her car door. "He's been saying things like that for 2 years, she heard herself say. She had not planned to say that. It came out like air from a punctured tire. Not always that bad, but things. Woo Jin-suk was quiet. He did not rush to fill it. "I dressed up tonight," she said. Softer now, more to herself than to him. "I rehearsed what I was going to say." "I know," he said. "You mentioned counseling." She laughed. It surprised her, a small, broken sound. "You heard all of that?" "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She turned to face him fully then. At least someone was listening. He held her gaze, and in the pale yellow light of the parking lot, Woo Jin-suk felt something he had not felt in a long time. Something sharp and inconvenient that he did not have a name for yet. "My name is Jin," he said. "Dorothy," she said. He gave a slight nod, like he was filing that away somewhere important. "You should go somewhere warm tonight," he said. "Not back to where he is." "I have nowhere else." She stopped. "I'll figure it out." "There's a hotel 2 blocks left," he said. "Clean, safe. Tell them Mr. Woo sent you." She frowned. "I don't need you to pay for—" "I'm not paying for anything," he said. "I'm giving you a name that will get you a good room without questions. That's all." Dorothy studied him. He was not pushy. He was not performing kindness for any obvious reason. He was just steady. Like a wall you didn't know was there until you leaned back and realized it had been holding you up the whole time. "Why?" she asked. He thought about it for a moment, like he was being honest instead of fast. "Because someone should have said something a long time ago," he said. "And I'm saying it now." He stepped back. That distance again. Careful, deliberate. "Good night, Dorothy," he said. And he walked to a black car parked at the far end of the lot, got in without looking back, and was gone. Dorothy stood there in the cold for another full minute. Then she picked up her phone, opened Maps, and typed, "Hotels near me." She did not give them Jin's name. She paid with her own card. She sat on the edge of a hotel bed in her green dress and stared at the wall for a long time. She did not know, could not have known, that Woo Jin-suk had not driven away. He had parked one street over. He was on his phone, speaking in low, rapid Korean to someone whose number was not saved under any name. "Find everything on a man named Gabriel Milani," he said. "He was at Yeonggam restaurant tonight, table 7. A pause on the other end. "No," Jin said quietly. "Not for that. I just want to know who he is." Another pause. "Because," he said, "some people need to understand that words have weight." He ended the call. He sat in the dark car and looked at the hotel 2 blocks away, where a light had just come on in a 3rd-floor window. He told himself he was just being careful, that this was nothing, that a woman in a parking lot was not his business. He had been lying to himself before. He recognized the feeling. He started the car and drove, but he took the long route home. 3 days passed. Dorothy went back to the apartment on Friday morning when she knew Gabriel would be at work. She packed one bag, practical things, the kind of packing you do when you're not sure how long you're leaving for, but you're honest enough with yourself to know you're leaving. She took her documents, her small jewelry box, the framed photo of her mother from the dresser. She left the wedding photo where it was. She had a colleague, a woman named Beverly from the architecture firm where Dorothy worked as a junior designer, who had a spare room and had offered it twice in the past year. Dorothy had said no both times because she was still trying. Now she sent a text. "Still have that room available?" Beverly replied in 4 seconds. "Get here whenever. Key is under the mat." Dorothy exhaled. She picked up her bag and walked out of the apartment she had shared with Gabriel for 3 years, and did not look back at the door. She told herself she felt nothing. That was not true. She felt everything: grief, relief, shame, a strange floating sensation, like she had just jumped off something and hadn't hit the ground yet. But she walked straight. And she kept walking. Beverly's place was small and full of plants. There was a cat named something unpronounceable. The spare room had a yellow curtain and smelled like wood and old books. Dorothy sat on the bed and cried for 45 minutes. Then she washed her face, changed her clothes, and made herself toast. That was Wednesday through Sunday. On Monday, she went back to work. The architecture firm where Dorothy worked was on the 12th floor of a building in the central district of Daejeon. It was a mid-size firm that had recently landed a large contract for a new mixed-use development on the south side of the city. It was the kind of project that meant everyone was working long hours and nobody was asking too many personal questions, which suited Dorothy perfectly. She had been there 3 hours when her supervisor called her into his office. His name was Mr. Beck, a round, cheerful man who wore the same 3 ties on rotation and always had a pen behind his ear. He was one of the people at work Dorothy actually liked. Sit, he said, waving at the chair. "The Woo Group called this morning." Dorothy frowned slightly. "The Woo Group? Big investment company. They're interested in co-developing the South Side project. If they come on board, it's very good for us. More funding, more scope." He spread his hands. "They want a presentation, full concept drawings, timeline, the whole thing, and they've requested it be handled by a single point of contact on our end." "Okay," Dorothy said. "Who are you assigning?" Mr. Beck smiled at her. "You? Me?" She blinked. "I'm Junior. You're the best drafter on the team and you think clearly under pressure," he said, with the certainty of a man who had made up his mind. "The meeting is Thursday. I'll send you their rep's contact." Dorothy nodded slowly. "All right, Thursday." She went back to her desk and opened the email Mr. Bayek had forwarded. It contained the company profile of the Woo Group, a private investment firm based in Cheonan, with portfolios in real estate, infrastructure, and private security consulting. At the bottom was the name of the representative who would be attending Thursday's meeting, Mr. W. Jin-suk, Director of Acquisitions. Dorothy stared at the name for a long time. Then she looked up at the ceiling, and then back at the screen, and said very quietly to herself, You have got to be joking. She did not tell Beverly about the parking lot. She did not tell Beverly about Jin. She spent Monday and Tuesday at her desk with her head down, drawing and redrawing concept layouts, telling herself that what happened at the restaurant was a coincidence, and what was about to happen on Thursday was a separate coincidence, and coincidences were just things that happened. On Wednesday evening, she was still at the office at 8:30 when her phone rang. Unknown caller, Daejeon area code. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Dorothy Milani. Not a question, a confirmation. She knew the voice immediately. Jin? She sat up straight in her chair. I apologize for calling, he said. I got your number from the firm's contact sheet. I wanted to... A brief pause. I wanted to make sure you were all right, before Thursday. Dorothy held the phone and looked at her desk. You knew it was me, when you requested the single contact. Silence on the other end. Jin. I looked at the firm's team page, he said. There was something careful in his voice. Not deceptive. Careful. Like a person choosing every word. I saw your name. I did not change the request. You could have. Yes. Why didn't you? Another pause. Longer this time. I told myself it was because you were clearly qualified, he said. That is partially true. Dorothy let that sit for a moment. How much of it is true? She asked. 60% maybe, he said. And she could hear, very faintly, that he was almost amused by his own answer. Like he had surprised himself. Dorothy leaned back in her chair. Outside the window, the city glittered. You looked up Gabriel, she said. It was not a question either. A longer silence. Yes, he said. And he is a financial consultant at a firm in the North District, Jin said carefully. He has a good salary, a clean public record. He coaches youth basketball on Saturday mornings. Dorothy closed her eyes. Gabriel and his Saturday basketball. He had always been good at performing goodness. He looks, Jin continued, quieter now. Like exactly the kind of man no one would believe. Something in Dorothy's chest pulled tight. That's very perceptive, she said. I've met that kind before, he said, and there was something in his voice then. Something older than the conversation, something that had lived in him a long time. She did not ask about it. Not yet. Thursday, she said. We keep it professional. Of course, he said. I mean it, Jin. I need this project. I need to do this well. You will, he said. Simply, without flattery. She hated how much that helped. Good night, she said. Good night, Dorothy. She put the phone down and sat in the quiet office for a while, listening to the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of the city, and tried to remember the last time someone had said her name like it mattered. Thursday arrived the way important days always do, too fast and too heavy. Dorothy was at the conference room 30 minutes early. Her drawings were printed and mounted. Her laptop was connected to the projector. She had a backup USB. She had a backup of the backup. She stood at the window in her navy blazer and watched the street below and told herself, this is work. This is just work. At exactly 10 o'clock, the elevator opened. Woo Jin-suk walked in with two people behind him, an assistant and a man in wire-rimmed glasses who carried a folder and looked like he had reviewed financial documents in his sleep. Jin himself wore a charcoal jacket, plain and well-fitted. His posture was the same as the parking lot, unhurried, contained, the kind of still that rooms tend to organize themselves around. He saw her immediately. He did not smile, but something shifted in his face. Small, controlled, the way a locked door opens just one click. Ms. Milani, he said. Mr. Wu, she said. They shook hands, professional, brief. His hand was warm. She turned to the display board and began. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. She explained the concept clearly, the mixed-use layout, the sustainability features, the community integration design. She answered questions from the man in wire-rimmed glasses without hesitating. She pointed to specific drawings and named the design, choices behind them. Jin watched. He asked exactly 4 questions. All precise, all smart, all the kind of questions that told you he had read every document before arriving. He did not interrupt. He took no notes, which meant he was either unimpressed or had a very good memory. At the end, he said, "We're interested." Mr. Beck, who had slipped in halfway through to observe, practically glowed. The formal exchange concluded. The assistant and the man with the folder left to discuss numbers with Mr. Beck in the smaller office down the hall. Dorothy was rolling up one of the drawings when she realized Jin had not followed them. He was standing at the window now, looking out at the same street she had looked at an hour ago. "You changed the layout from the initial proposal," he said. She glanced up. "The east wing, yes. The original had too much commercial density near the residential zone. I redistributed." "It's better," he said. She paused. "The original was efficient," he continued. "But your version has space, room to breathe." He looked at her then. "Not everyone thinks to leave room to breathe." Dorothy looked at the drawing in her hands for a moment. "Are we still talking about architecture?" she asked. Jin looked at her, direct, unguarded, the most unguarded she had seen him. "I don't know," he said. The conference room was quiet for a moment. Then Dorothy finished rolling the drawing, capped the tube and said, "Thank you for the business, Mr. Wu." He gave a small nod. "Thank you for the presentation, Miss Milani." He walked toward the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. "There's a market on Saturdays near the South District," he said, without turning around. "The good kind, local vendors, hot food. I go most weeks." He did not say anything else. He walked out. Dorothy stood in the empty conference room and looked at the door. She did not go to the market that Saturday, but she thought about it the whole week. What she did not know, what she could not have seen coming, was that Gabriel had been watching. He had not followed her. He did not know about Beverly's apartment, or the hotel, or the Thursday meeting. But Gabriel was the kind of man who noticed absences the way some people notice presence, not because he cared, but because he needed to account for things he felt he owned. He had driven past the architecture firm on Thursday morning, trying to remember something he had half heard her say months ago about a big project. He had parked across the street, not sure what he was looking for. He had seen the black car pull up. He had seen the man in the charcoal jacket get out. And when the man walked into the building, Gabriel had taken a photo on his phone, automatic, the reflex of a suspicious person, and driven away feeling like something had just shifted in a game he hadn't known he was playing. That night, he made a call. "I need to know who drives a black car," he said. "I'll send you a photo." The person on the other end was an old acquaintance from Gabriel's days at a trading firm, a man who knew how to find things that were meant to stay hidden. "Give me 48 hours, the man said. Gabriel said fine. He sat back in the apartment that still had Dorothy's wedding photo on the wall and told himself he wasn't worried. He was wrong to not be worried, because the man he had photographed was not the kind of man you quietly investigated without someone finding out. And someone always found out. The call came to Jin on a Sunday afternoon. He was at the market, the one near the South District, the one he had mentioned to Dorothy as casually as someone mentions the weather. He was standing at a stall of dried persimmons, listening to the vendor explain how the cold snap had been good for the fruit this year, when his phone buzzed twice in quick succession. He looked at the screen. The message was 2 words from a number he kept saved simply as H, someone's, looking. Jin put the persimmons down. He thanked the vendor and walked back to his car without hurrying. Hurrying was for people who were surprised. He called H back when he was inside with the doors closed. "Who?" "A man named Gabriel Milani. He used an intermediary, a data broker out of the North District. Asked for a background pull on your car and license. He got the registration, stopped there. The broker flagged it because of the flag we put on your plate 3 years ago." Jin was quiet for a moment. "Gabriel Milani," he said. You know him? Of him, Jin said. How deep did he get? Not deep, just the surface. He knows the car's registered to Wu Holdings. He probably knows your name now. That's it. Good. Jin exhaled. Keep it at that. You want us to? No, Jin said. Nothing like that. Just watch. If he looks again, I want to know. He ended the call. He sat in the parked car outside the market and looked at the stalls through the windshield. People buying. Vegetables. A grandmother haggling over rice cakes. 2 children chasing each other between the legs of adults. And thought about a woman standing in a cold parking lot in a green dress. He had not seen Dorothy since Thursday. That was 4 days ago. He was aware of this in the specific, inconvenient way you are aware of a sound that stops, the silence itself becoming noticeable. He picked up his phone and held it for a long time. Then he put it back in his pocket and drove home. Dorothy was at Beverly's kitchen table on Sunday afternoon with a mug of tea and 3 property law documents she was trying to understand, because she had called a lawyer about the separation, and the lawyer had sent her a list of things to gather. It was the kind of task that should have felt heavy but actually felt clarifying, like cleaning out a room that had been cluttered for too long. Beverly was across the table, pretending to read a novel but clearly watching her. You're thinking about something, Beverly said. I'm reading property law. Before that, Dorothy did not answer immediately. She turned a page she had not fully read. There's a man, she said finally. Beverly put the novel all the way down. Not like that, Dorothy said quickly. We've met twice. He's a client. Sort of. He's the one who... She paused. He was at the restaurant, the night I left Gabriel. He was in the booth behind us. Beverly stared. He heard? Everything. And then he turned up as a client. It was a coincidence. Mostly. Beverly looked at her for a long moment. Dorothy, what kind of man is he? Dorothy thought about how to answer that. She thought about the parking lot. She thought about the conference room and your version has room to breathe. She thought about the 4 precise questions and the way he said goodnight like it meant something. The kind that pays attention, she said quietly. Beverly nodded slowly. Those are the ones to be careful of. I know. Also, Beverly added, those are the ones worth knowing. Dorothy looked down at her property documents. He mentioned a market. Which market? The Saturday one, South District. Beverly turned back to her novel. It's Sunday today, she said simply. You've got 6 days to decide. She went. She told herself it was because she needed fresh produce, and the South District market had a good fruit stall. She dressed practically. Jeans, her good gray coat, her hair down. She arrived at 10:15 and spent 20 minutes at the fruit stall being very interested in clementines. She heard his voice before she saw him. He was 3 stalls over, talking to a man who sold grains. Not in Korean this time. In a slow, careful mix of Korean and some broken local dialect that made the vendor laugh. Jin was nodding along to something, holding a small paper bag, and he looked different here. Less composed in the best way. Like the market had taken 1 layer off him. He turned and saw her. A beat of stillness between them. Then she held up her bag of clementines and said, with completely flat delivery, fresh produce. The corner of his mouth moved, just slightly. Of course. He walked over. They fell into step together with the ease of people who had somehow already practiced this. The grain vendor, she said. You know him? His grandfather sold grain to my grandfather, Jin said. His family moved here from Asan 30 years ago. You grew up in Cheonan? Yes. Did you always know? She stopped. She had almost asked, did you always know you'd be what you are? She redirected. Did you always want to work in investment? Jin glanced at her sideways. He had heard the pause. No, he said. I wanted to be an architect, actually. Dorothy stopped walking. He looked back at her. What? You? She almost laughed. You wanted to be an architect. I was 14. I read a book about the Sagrada Familia and spent 6 months drawing buildings in my school notebooks. What happened? Something crossed his face. Not pain exactly, more like the memory of a door that had been closed for a long time and was now being mentioned in passing. Family needed something different from me, he said. Dorothy looked at him. She thought about a 14-year-old boy filling notebooks with buildings. That's, she said softly, that's a hard thing to give up. Most things worth having require giving something up, he said. He looked at her with the directness that she was beginning to recognize as his natural way. Not aggressive, just honest. What did you give up? The question landed cleanly. Dorothy looked at the stalls around them. A woman testing the weight of a pumpkin. A teenager looking bored at a phone case stall. The whole ordinary world of a Sunday market. I gave up believing I was enough, she said, a little at a time, until I didn't notice anymore. Jin did not respond right away. He watched her with that careful, taking inventory expression. You noticed, he said. That's why you dressed up. That's why you made the appointment. That's why you rehearsed what you were going to say. She looked at him. How is that noticing? Because a person who is completely given up doesn't try to save the thing, he said. They just survive in it. You were still trying. He paused. That's different. Dorothy looked away. The clementines in her bag were starting to feel heavier than they should. You're very, she searched for the word. Perceptive, he offered. The same word she had used on the phone. I was going to say exhausting, she said, and then she laughed, genuinely surprised by it. And after a half-second, so did he. His laugh was low and quiet and real, the kind that has been stored up for a while. They walked for another half hour. They talked about the market, about architecture, about a bad documentary they had both apparently seen about urban planning, about Cheonan in winter, about Beverly's cat, with the unpronounceable name. They did not talk about Gabriel. They did not talk about what Jin did for a living, not the full version. They existed for that hour and a half, in the pleasant suspension of two people who know the complicated parts are coming but have agreed without saying so to let the simple parts last a little longer. At the edge of the market, where the last stall gave way to the street, they stopped. Next Saturday, he said. Dorothy looked at him. She thought about Beverly's words. Those are the ones worth knowing. She thought about the 14-year-old with the notebook full of buildings. I might be here, she said. He nodded, like that was exactly what he expected, and that it was enough. She walked to her car. She did not look back. She was 1 block away when her phone rang. It was a number she knew. Gabriel. She stared at it for 3 full rings. She answered. Dorothy. His voice was different from the restaurant. Not flat anymore. Something else in it. Something coiled. We need to talk. Gabriel, I know you've been meeting someone, he said. Her grip tightened on the phone. I work. I have meetings. I'm not stupid, he said very quietly. I looked into him. The world slowed slightly. Who? She said carefully. The man from the black car. A pause. Do you know what his company actually is, Dorothy? Do you know what he actually does? She said nothing. Come home, Gabriel said. His voice had shifted again, not coiled now. Something closer to fear, barely masked. Come home and we can talk about the counseling. Gabriel. She kept her voice level. Don't. Dorothy, this man is dangerous. Goodbye, Gabriel. She ended the call. She stood on the pavement and let the silence settle. She thought about Jin in the conference room, Jin at the market, Jin in the parking lot saying you don't have to be to a woman he didn't know. She thought about the phone call from H that she didn't know about. Someone's looking. And then she thought, if Gabriel has been looking, what has he found? And who has he told? She got in her car. She drove back to Beverly's place. She sat in the car in the parking space outside for a long time. Then she called the number Jin had used on Wednesday night. It rang twice. Dorothy, he said. Gabriel called me, she said. He said he looked into you. A pause. How much does he know? I'm not sure. He said the black car. He said what you actually do. He was scared, I think. Jin was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was completely level. The same tone she had noticed in the restaurant. Calm the way deep water is calm. "Are you somewhere safe?" he asked. "I'm outside Beverly's." "Go inside," he said. "Don't open the door for anyone tonight who isn't Beverly." "Jin, I'm going to handle this," he said. "Not the way you're imagining. I need you to trust that." Dorothy looked at the building in front of her. The yellow light in Beverly's window on the second floor. "I don't fully know what you are," she said honestly. "I know," he said, and then quieter. "I'll explain, I promise. Just go inside." She went inside. That night she lay in the room with the yellow curtain and listened to the city and thought about the fact that her life, which 3 weeks ago had been numb and gray and manageable, had become something else entirely. Something she could not predict. She wasn't sure yet if that terrified her or if, somewhere underneath the fear, it felt more like being awake than she had been in years. What she did not know, what neither she nor Jin could have fully anticipated, was that Gabriel had not stopped at one phone call to the broker. He had made a second call to a man named Raymond, who was old money and bad decisions and had connections that crossed very specific lines. Gabriel had described Jin, described the car, described the company name. Raymond had gone quiet on the other end for a long time. Then he said, "Gabriel, do you know whose name you just said to me?" Gabriel said he did not understand. "Stop what you're doing," Raymond said. His voice had gone flat and careful. "Don't pull any more threads on this man. Do you hear me? Leave it alone." Gabriel asked why. Raymond said, "Because the last 3 people who didn't take that advice are not people you can call anymore." Then he hung up. Gabriel sat in the apartment with the wedding photo and the silence, and for the first time since this began, he was genuinely, properly afraid. Not of Dorothy, of what he might have accidentally walked into. The next morning, a package arrived at Dorothy's desk at the firm. No return address. Her name written in clean, block letters. Inside, a sealed envelope and a small card that said simply, "Read this before anyone else does." Dorothy looked at the card, then at the envelope. She took both to the bathroom at the end of the hall and locked the door. Inside, the envelope was a single folded sheet of paper. A printed document, formal, dense, the kind of language used in legal agreements. It took her 2 reads to understand what she was looking at. It was a contract with her name on it, her signature at the bottom, for the sale of design rights on the South Side project. Dated 8 weeks ago, before the project had even been formally assigned to her. She had never signed this. She had never seen it. She read it again, more carefully. The signature looked very much like hers. The design specifications described were close, but not exact. They were based on the original proposal, not her revised version. As if someone had fabricated the document before they knew she would change the layout. Her name, her firm, forged. And at the top, the recipient of the rights transfer, a company called Gable and Associates. She knew that name. Gabriel worked at Gable and Associates. Dorothy stood in the bathroom with the document in her hands and felt the floor of everything she understood shift underneath her. Gabriel had not been trying to save the marriage at the restaurant. He hadn't staged that dinner to hurt her or to end things. He had staged it. She understood now with a horrible clarity. To get her out of the firm. To get her removed. If she walked out publicly in crisis, if she were unstable, grieving, distracted, she would have been taken off the project. The project would have needed a new contact. And the design rights. She thought about Jin asking for a single point of contact. She thought about how Gabriel had been positioned to benefit if she was removed before that meeting. The signature on the document was forged, which meant someone had prepared this weeks ago and planned to use it. If the Wu Group partnership succeeded, someone wanted to attach Dorothy's name to a fraudulent rights transfer, making it look like she had secretly sold proprietary design elements to her husband's firm before the partnership was even formalized. It would end her career. It would potentially open a criminal inquiry. And Gabriel, who had positioned himself carefully, would be far away from it. Dorothy folded the document. She put it back in the envelope. She unlocked the bathroom door, walked calmly back to her desk, and picked up her phone. She called Jin. "I need to see you," she said. "Today." They met at a small tea house in the Central District, the kind of place with wooden furniture and no music and 6 tables that were all empty at 2 in the afternoon. Jin was already there when she arrived. He looked at her face when she came through the door and said nothing, just gestured at the chair across from him. She put the envelope on the table. He read it once. He placed it down with the same stillness he had shown in the parking lot, in the conference room, at the market. But she had learned to read him now, slightly. And she could see in the line of his jaw and the way he didn't reach for his tea that he was not calm. He was controlled. "How long has this been prepared?" she asked. "The paper quality and the printer formatting?" He stopped himself, looked at her. "I'm sorry. You don't need technical details. What I mean is, this was made a minimum of 6 weeks ago, before you were formally assigned." Gabriel knew I'd be assigned to it. He works at Gable. Gable has been tracking this development for 2 years. They wanted in. When the Wu Group expressed interest, Jin paused, chose words. "There are people who knew my company would be the investment partner before the public announcement. Gabriel would have had access to that information through his firm." "So he knew," Dorothy said slowly, "that you, a company connected to you, would be involved. And he staged the dinner to destabilize you," Jin said. "Remove you from the project. Insert the forged document. Make it look like you had betrayed the firm for personal gain." He looked at the document again. "It's careful work. Someone helped him design this." Dorothy looked at the table. "He called me Saturday," she said. "Said you were dangerous, that he was scared." She paused. "Was that real?" "Probably both," Jin said. "He found out who I was and realized the plan had complications he hadn't predicted. Namely, that you and I—" She stopped. Jin looked at her. "That we know each other," he said. Careful, but there was something underneath the care. Yes, he wouldn't have planned for that. Silence at the table. "Jin," she looked at him directly. "Tell me what you do. The full version." He met her gaze. He had been expecting this question. She could see that he had been deciding for some time exactly how he would answer it. "I run an organization," he said. "We operate in areas that—" He exhaled once. "We're not legal in the conventional sense. We work in the space that exists between the law and the places the law doesn't reach. My operations involve leverage, information, controlled pressure. We have never hurt anyone who didn't choose a path that led them to us." Dorothy held his gaze. "Have you hurt people?" "I've made choices," he said. "Some of them I would make again. Some of them I carry." Honest. She had asked for the full version, and he had given it. "Are you dangerous?" she said. "To people who go after what I care about," he said. "Yes." The air in the tea house sat very still. Dorothy looked down at the document on the table. She thought about 5 years, about green dresses and rehearsed bullet points, and a man who had planned her professional destruction while sitting across from her at a restaurant. She thought about what it meant to be targeted by someone who had slept beside her, eaten her cooking, borrowed her umbrella in the rain. "What do we do about this?" she said. And she noticed, even as she said it, that she had said we. Jin noticed too. She could see it. "There are 3 people at Gable who know about this document," he said. "Gabriel is one. The other 2 are above him. They're the ones who designed it. Gabriel was the instrument, not the architect." He looked at the forged signature. "We expose the 2 above him. The document is neutralized, and your name is clear." "How do you expose them without—" She paused. "Without something that will come back on you. Or me." "I have a contact," he said. "A journalist, legitimate. He has been building a story on Gable and Associates for 14 months. Financial misconduct, fabricated investment documents. This, he tapped the envelope. This is the piece he was missing. Dorothy stared. You already had a file on Gable? I had a file on everyone who was orbiting this project, he said. It's how I operate. Did you know about Gabriel specifically? Not until the parking lot, he said. After that, he paused. Yes, I pulled everything on him within 24 hours. And you didn't tell me. You had just left your husband. You were processing. Jin. Her voice was not angry. It was leveled. Don't decide what I can process. He held her gaze. And then he gave a single, genuine nod. You're right, he said. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. She looked at the envelope. Okay, she said. The journalist. I'll set it up, he said. You'll need to give a statement. What you received, when, the context of your role on the project. You won't need to mention me. What about Gabriel? Jin was quiet for a moment. That's your choice, he said. He was used by the people above him. He also willingly participated. What you want done about his part of it, I'll follow your lead. Dorothy sat with that. I'll follow your lead. No one in her life had said that to her in a very long time. He's going to push back, she said. When he sees the story moving, he won't be able to, Jin said. He'll be occupied. She looked at him. I called in 2 obligations this morning, he said, from people who owe me significantly. Gabriel's supervisor at Gable received a very thorough audit request from 2 separate regulatory bodies at 9 a.m. today. Gabriel himself received a certified letter informing him that a former client has opened a complaint with the Financial Conduct Authority. Dorothy stared. You did that this morning? After you called. Jin, I told you I'd handle it, he said. Not the way you were imagining. She sat back slowly. She looked at this man. This careful, controlled, quietly terrifying man, sitting in a tea house with his hands folded on the table, and she thought about how he had once stood in a cold parking lot and said, You don't have to be. Are you always like this? She asked. He thought about it. Like what? Like 3 steps ahead, watching everything, already. She gestured at the table, at the situation, at all of it. It used to be only about protection, he said. He looked at his folded hands. Lately it feels like something else. The question that rose in her, what does it feel like, stayed in her throat. She was not quite ready to ask it. Not yet. Not in a tea house over a forged document. But she felt it, and she thought he felt her feeling it. And neither of them said anything, which was its own kind of answer. There's one more thing, Jin said. She waited. The person who helped Gabriel design the document, he said. The one above him, the real architect of this. His name is Weston Gray. He has been trying to acquire the South Side project through fraudulent means for 2 years. He is also, Jin paused. He has ties to 3 of my competitors. He knew who I was when he designed this. Dorothy sat forward. He came after you through me. I believe so, Jin said. I believe he found out about the parking lot, about us knowing each other, and I believe he accelerated the timeline of the document because of that. The cold moved through her slowly. He used me as leverage against you. He tried, Jin said. She looked at him. Does that mean I'm in danger? Jin held her gaze without flinching. I won't let that happen. That's not the same as no, she said. No, he said quietly. It isn't. Dorothy looked out the tea house window at the ordinary street. A woman walking a dog. A delivery man on a bicycle. The unremarkable surface of a city that had no idea what was happening inside this wooden room. Okay, she said. For the second time in this story, she said it. Just that, just okay. But this time, it meant something different. This time, it meant, I'm in. Whatever comes next, I'm not running from it. Jin looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his tea. Okay, he said. 3 days later, the story broke. Not the full story. Not the parts that involved Jin. Not the parts that involved parking lots and market stalls and tea houses. The public version was about Gable and Associates, about fabricated documents, about Weston Gray and two other senior partners who had spent 2 years trying to defraud a city development project. The journalist published it on a Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, Weston Gray had been placed on administrative leave. By Friday morning, 2 other firms had submitted complaints to regulators about Gable. Gabriel was not named in the article, but he was suspended from his position pending the internal review that Gable's board immediately launched. He called Dorothy twice on Thursday. She did not answer. Dorothy was at her desk when Mr. Beck came out of his office looking slightly dazed and said, "The Wu Group has confirmed the partnership. Full scope. We're moving forward." Dorothy nodded. She looked at her revised drawings on the screen. The east wing, the redistributed space, the room to breathe she had built into the design. She saved the file. She took a long drink of her coffee. She sent Jin one text. "It's done." He replied 4 minutes later with 2 words. "You're good." She looked at that for a while. Then her phone rang with an unknown number. Not a Daejeon area code, a number she didn't recognize. She answered. "Dorothy Milani." A man's voice, not Jin. Older, deliberate. "We have a mutual acquaintance in Cheonan. I think it's time we spoke about the people you've been spending time with." The voice was smooth and patient in the way a trap is patient. Dorothy looked around the empty office. Mr. Beck had gone back into his room. The floor was quiet. "Who is this?" she said. "A friend," the man said. "Or I could be. That depends entirely on what you decide to do in the next 48 hours. The line was silent for a moment. "You're going to want to listen carefully," he said, "because what I'm about to tell you about Woo Jin-suk, your friend from Cheonan, is going to change everything you think you know." Dorothy held the phone. Her heart was not hammering. She was not shaking. She was standing very straight in a quiet office, and she was thinking, "Jin told me he was 3 steps ahead. So am I." "I'm listening," she said. The man on the phone said his name was Harlan Cross. He said it like a business introduction, firm, practiced, the name placed exactly where it would land. He was not Korean. His accent was somewhere mid-Atlantic, the particular sound of a person who had traveled so long he belonged nowhere specifically. "I've known Jin-suk for 11 years, Harlan said. "Before the investment firm, before Daejeon, before he became whatever he's told you he is." "He told me the truth," Dorothy said. "A version of it," Harlan said. "Here's the version he left out. 7 years ago, there was an operation in the West. A cleanup, they called it. 3 people went missing, competitors who were becoming problems. Jin-suk ordered it, not as a last resort, as a first decision." Dorothy did not speak. "He was 27 years old," Harlan continued, "and he made that call without hesitation. That's the man you're involving yourself with." The office was very quiet. Dorothy looked at her drawing on the screen. The South Side project, the East Wing with the room she had built in to breathe. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because Weston Gray is a business associate of mine," Harlan said. "And you helped dismantle something that I had considerable investment in. I'm not calling for revenge. That's not how I operate. I'm calling because I want you to understand what you've been used for. I wasn't used." "Dorothy," his voice turned almost kind. The synthetic kindness of a person delivering a designed blow. "Jin knew about Gray months before the parking lot. He knew Gray was using your firm as a front. He needed someone inside who could validate the forged document before it was filed. That's why he requested a single contact. That's why he came to your firm. You were not a coincidence. You were a position." Dorothy was very still. "He heard your husband that night," Harlan continued, "and he saw an opportunity. A woman in crisis, attached to the firm, emotionally vulnerable, desperate to prove herself." "Stop," Dorothy said. Harlan stopped. A beat, 2 beats, 3. "I'll ask you once," Dorothy said. "Can you prove any of what you just said?" "I can send you documents." "Documents," she said, "from a man who just watched his associate go down in a fraud investigation. Documents you're presenting to me 48 hours after your deal collapsed. Silence. Here's what I'm going to do, Dorothy said. I'm going to end this call. I'm going to forward your number to someone who will know exactly who you are. And then, and this is important, I'm going to go ask Jin directly. Because that's what adults do. She ended the call. She sat very still at her desk. Then she opened a new text to Jin. Someone named Harlan Cross just called me. Do you know him? The reply came in under 30 seconds. Where are you right now? Office, stay there. I'm coming. She put the phone down. She looked at her drawings. She thought about what Harlan had said. You were a position. And she examined it carefully. The way you examine something that could be a wound or could be nothing, and you need to know which before you decide how to move. She thought about the parking lot. She thought about the way he had stood at exactly the right distance. She thought about 60% maybe. She thought about the tea house, and I'll follow your lead. She thought about a 14-year-old in Cheonan drawing buildings in a notebook. She did not know the full truth yet, but she had learned, in 5 years of marriage to a man who lied quietly, that truth had a texture, and whatever had passed between her and Jin had a texture she recognized. It was not the texture of calculation. It was the texture of something that kept surprising both of them. She would still ask him directly. She had said she would, and she would mean it. But she was not afraid. Jin arrived 22 minutes later. He came alone, no assistant, no driver. He came up the elevator and found her at her desk, and he stood at the edge of her workspace and said, Tell me what he said, all of it. She told him. She did not soften it or summarize it. She repeated it as close to verbatim as she could. She watched his face while she spoke. His jaw tightened once when she got to the part about the operation. Just once. Everything else stayed controlled. When she finished, she said, Is any of it true? Jin looked at her for a long moment. 7 years ago, he said slowly, there was an incident. 3 men. They were not innocent men. They had done considerable harm to people who could not protect themselves. I made a decision that I cannot take back. He paused. I don't offer that as an excuse. It's the context. But the decision was mine. Dorothy held his gaze. Did you plan this from the beginning? The parking lot. Did you know who I was? No, he said. And then, before she could press, but I want to be completely honest with you. After the parking lot, after I pulled Gabriel's background, I did see that you were connected to the firm Gray was using. I did recognize the overlap. And I told myself that the project interest was already legitimate, that I wasn't using you. He exhaled once. I'm not certain I was as clean in my thinking as I wanted to be. Dorothy looked at him. But the market, he said, quieter now. The phone call, the tea house. That was not a position. I need you to know that. How do I know? Because, he said, if you had been only useful to me, I would have kept the distance. I would have been professional and careful, and I would have handed the journalist the document without ever sitting across from you in a tea house. I would have protected my operation and moved on. He held her gaze. I did not move on. Silence in the office. Harlan Cross, Dorothy said carefully. What is he to you? He was my mentor, Jin said. For 4 years when I was starting out, he taught me how to operate, how to build leverage, how to make decisions. A pause. He also taught me that people are instruments, that you maintain them when useful and release them when not. His voice was flat now, the specific flatness of someone separating from something that used to be true. I spent 3 years unlearning that. Dorothy looked at him. Are you still unlearning it? Jin met her eyes. Yes, he said. I think I will be for a while. Honest, painfully honest. The kind of honest that doesn't make you feel better immediately. It just makes you feel like you're standing on solid ground. Dorothy looked at her desk, at her drawings, at the window and the city and the long chain of events that had started with a whispered sentence in a restaurant. Harlan is going to keep coming, she said. Yes. Not because of the project anymore, because of... She gestured between them. Yes, Jin. said. He'll see you as leverage. It's how he thinks. So what do we do? Jin looked at her, and something in his face, that controlled, contained expression, shifted in a way she had not seen before. Not wide open, just real. The way a person looks when they stop performing steadiness and are actually, genuinely asking another person to help them figure something out. I don't know, he said. I usually work alone. Dorothy blinked. That's surprisingly honest. I'm trying something new, he said. She almost smiled. We're going to need to tell Mr. Beck something. If Harlan targets the firm, I have a security firm I trust, Jin said. They can monitor without anyone knowing they're there. Your colleague Beverly, she should know to be careful. Beverly's tougher than she looks, Dorothy said. I believe you. They stood there in the quiet office, the city sprawling beyond the window, and the thing between them, large and complicated and still being named, sat in the air like something that had decided to stay. Jin, Dorothy said. He looked at her. I'm not fragile, she said. I know you've been careful with me. I know you've been... She searched for the word. Calibrating, deciding what I can handle. I need you to stop. Okay, he said. The same word she had said to him, twice now in this story. And in his mouth it carried the same weight hers had. And, she said, if something comes, anything about Harlan, about what's next, you tell me before you move. Not after, before. That's not how I usually... I know, she said. New thing. He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his eyes, that dark, careful, taking inventory look, was not taking inventory anymore. It was just looking at her, without any calculation in it. Okay, he said again. That night, Dorothy sat in the room with a yellow curtain and wrote 3 things in the Notes app on her phone. 1. You are not what Gabriel said you were. 2. You were always worth listening to. 3. Whatever this is, it is yours. You didn't fall into it. You walked toward it. She put her phone down. She looked at the yellow curtain in the dark room. Beverly's unpronounceable cat was sitting on the end of the bed, blinking at her with complete feline indifference. I know, she said to the cat. In an apartment on the far side of the city, Gabriel Milani sat in a room with a wedding photo and an audit letter, and the dawning comprehension that the door he had opened, the one with Weston Gray and the forged document and the plans to remove Dorothy from the board, had led somewhere he had not expected, and that the man photographed getting out of the black car was not someone you simply photographed. He called Raymond again. Raymond did not answer. Gabriel put the phone down and looked at the wedding photo for a very long time. In a hotel suite in another part of the city, Harlan Cross sat with a glass of water and a tablet displaying 3 names. He had been in this city for a week. He planned to stay longer. He had spent 11 years watching Woo Jin-suk become something extraordinary and something dangerous, and he had watched with the patient interest of a man who understood that the best way to bring down something powerful was not to attack it directly, but to find what it was starting, for the first time, to care about. He had found it. He circled Dorothy Milani's name with his finger on the screen. The thing about Jin, Harlan knew, was that he had been cold for years. Functional, brilliant, ruthless in the clean way of someone who had no attachments to protect. That coldness had made him invulnerable. But something had changed recently. Harlan could see it in the decisions Jin had made in the last 3 weeks. The journalist, the audit request, the way he had folded the Gable situation so precisely that no fingerprints remained. That was not operational thinking. That was personal. And personal was exploitable. Harlan Cross set the tablet down. He picked up his phone. He dialed. I need everything on the lawyer handling her separation, he said. And I need the architectural drawings from the South Side project, specifically who owns the original copyright. A pause. No, he said quietly. We're not done. We're just starting. What no one in this city knew, not Dorothy, not Jin, not Gabriel, not even Harlan Cross, was that Jin had made one phone call 3 days ago that none of them knew about. To a man in Cheonan. A man who was Jin's father in every way except blood. A retired judge who had spent 30 years watching what happened when power was misused and who had, over the past decade, very quietly built a network of his own. "There is a woman," Jin had said to him. "She is worth protecting. And there is a man, an old associate of mine, who is going to try to use her." The retired man had said nothing for a moment. "Does she know you made this call?" he asked. "No," Jin said. "Will you tell her?" Jin had paused. "Yes, when the time is right." "Tell her sooner," the old man said. "That is always the mistake. We think we are protecting people by keeping them outside the circle. We are only delaying the moment they have to decide if they trust us." Jin had heard that. He had sat with it. And the next day, at the firm, he had said, "Before you move, not after." Because Dorothy had asked, and because the old man was right. 2 weeks later, on a cold Saturday morning, Dorothy stood at the fruit stall in the South District Market. She was buying clementines. She was not pretending she was there for any other reason. Jin appeared at her shoulder. "You're early," she said. "You're earlier," he said. She handed him a clementine. He held it with both hands like it was something significant. They walked. The market was the same. The grain vendor, the grandmother with the rice cakes, the children underfoot. The ordinary world doing its ordinary things. "Harlan's still in the city," Jin said. "I know," she said. "Beverly's neighbor spotted the car last Tuesday. I've been keeping notes." Jin looked at her sideways. "You've been tracking him." "Someone told me to stop being protected from information," she said simply. A pause. Then, "I said I'd follow your lead." "You did," she agreed. They walked past a stall of winter squash, past a woman selling hand-knitted gloves, past the grain vendor who waved at Jin like they were old friends. Because they were. "My father," Jin started. Stopped, corrected. "The man who raised me. He wants to meet you." Dorothy looked at him. "Why?" "Because I told him about you," Jin said. Simply. "And because he has been telling me for 15 years to find someone with a clear mind and a backbone." He paused. "He said I should tell you sooner rather than later." Dorothy looked at her clementine bag. The sun was pale and cold above the market stalls. "You told someone about me," she said. "Yes. Before all the dangerous parts were resolved?" "Before," he said. "Yes." She thought about 3 bullet points in a notes app. She thought about a green dress and a restaurant and a man who had never listened, and another man in a cold parking lot who had listened without being asked. She thought about room to breathe, the thing she had built into the East Wing, the thing that turned a good design into something real. "Okay," she said. 3rd time. That word between them. Small, steady, sure. Jin looked at her, and for the first time, without any audience, without the careful performance of composure, he let himself look at her the way he had been wanting to since a parking lot in November. Open, uncertain, full of something that was still finding its name. "Dorothy," he said. "I know," she said. Neither of them said anything else. They walked on through the market in the cold morning light, 2 people in the middle of something unfinished and large and, for the first time in both their lives, not entirely terrifying. Somewhere on the other side of the city, Harlan Cross was planning his next move. Somewhere across town, Gabriel was reading an audit notice with shaking hands. Somewhere in Cheonan, an old man was setting the table for guests who had not yet been invited. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, 2 people who had started with a whispered sentence and a cold parking lot were walking through a market and discovering, slowly and carefully and with their eyes wide open, that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world is not the person who threatens you. It is the person who, for the first time, actually sees you. A man whispered 3 words to destroy his wife, and instead, He put her exactly where she was always meant to be. This story is just beginning, and the next chapter will change everything you thought you understood about Jin, Dorothy, and what Harlan Cross has buried for 11 years. Subscribe now, because the truth that's coming will leave you breathless.